Right now, we'd like to bring on a young man who believes in doing things his own way. And based on the way he kind of get next to all of the folks who've seen him work, his way has got to be pretty hip. So let's lay some noise.
Listen up, nigga.
2000 and beyond.
This so-called democracy.
Welcome to the Outside Leverage podcast. I am Robert Green, your host. Joining me tonight, I have Thomas Bassinger of the Tampa Bay Times, a contributor to the annual Football Outsiders Almanac. Thomas Bassinger, welcome and thank you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Robert.
Pleasure's all mine, man. So we are in our second week of NFL free agency. Yeah, I just want to go ahead and quickly get your opinion on some of these guys that we have signed back. I kind of run through a list of the few people that we have. You might have heard of this one cat, Thomas Brady or something like that. They got him. He was a free agent from New England, I think.
The second greatest Tom B in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, second. He's number two. Already he's come in. He's number two, so he's working his way up. But quick question, man. Just starting with Tom Brady, what did you think of the acquisition?
Well, first off, I think the BUCS are going to have to order a few more golf carts for training camp with with some of these older vets. I kid. Tom Brady, he drinks smoothies and he's pliable and wears magic pajamas and all that. So Brady will be fine. I think just the bottom line on the Tom Brady signing, 2 years, $50 million up to 59 million. I think for one season, it's a risk worth taking. You have a chance to bring in the greatest of all time. This team's ready to win now. I get the appeal, and especially from a marketing standpoint, that's an A plus deal. The Glazers, spent a lot, but they'll recover every cent, I'm sure. It's the second year that kind of that concerns me a little bit, or actually a lot. That's not a slight on Tom Brady at all. It's just at that point, 44 years old, we're really in uncharted territory. We're kind of already there. There's only a handful of quarterbacks who have even thrown passes at this age. So, I think for 1 year, this has a solid chance of working. I'm not predicting a Super Bowl run or anything. It's a little early for that. There's still the rest of the offseason and the draft to go. But I think for 1 year this has a chance of working and being special. The second year, I just don't know. That's a big gamble, and we've seen before quarterbacks who kind of just fall off a cliff at the end. Of course, there was Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning had a history of neck issues. Tom Brady doesn't have that. But going back to Brett Favre, Brett Favre had that MVP caliber year in Minnesota, and then after that, it turned ugly. So. As I said, uncharted territory in that second year.
You think that's more of a risk than, let's say, they stayed with the former starting quarterback? You think that was a 2-year risk, possibly re-signing the former starting quarterback, or we think this is a bigger risk here with the age factor and possible injury factor of a Tom Brady?
Oh boy, we're already getting into Jameis here.
It's a good question. I just started the question. I'm like, man, because my whole deal was if the possible re-signing of the former starting quarterback, it was like going to be a 2-year deal. Or in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, what do they do again? They do a 2-year, short-term, wait and see kind of deal. Like, would that be a bigger risk than, the age factor of the greatest of all time? I still do it with air quotes because I'm I'm not bought. I'm not completely sold on the greatest of all time. Not just yet.
No, that's a good question. So it's basically what, 2 years of Brady versus 2 years of Winston, right? Um, I'd probably come down on the side of 2 years of Tom Brady if that's the choice. And I think part of it is the curiosity factor. Really, I know that's not a kind of a down the line kind of neutral take. I'm kind of curious to see how this will all unfold. And with Winston, I think we know what we had. A consistently inconsistent quarterback, and I don't know that it was going to work here. And that's not to say that I think that Winston is a bad quarterback overall. I know some people might label my takes as me being a hater.
You're absolutely. You're absolutely. That was absolutely they do.
But I think Jameis Winston. I mean, last season I think 30 interceptions, and look, I know not all 30 of those interceptions were his fault.
No.
But whether you think it's 15 or 20, fine. Say it's 15 or it's 20, somewhere in that range. He still threw another 15 or 20 that were interceptable and were dropped, which also led the league. So, those 30 interceptions really weren't all that fluky.
Pretty much every season he's played at least 16, or every season he's played 16 games, he's had 15 INTs. Whether they were all his fault or not, which pretty much like every quarterback, they're not all the quarterback's fault. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
Everybody has tip passes. Everybody has all these other things, and bad stuff happened to him. But every season he's played 16 games, he had, if I'm not mistaken, he's had 15 INTs, which is still a lot compared to every other good starting quarterback that I can name.
Right. There's the interceptions, and then also in the past, I don't recall them being so much a problem this year.
Yeah.
But fumbles in the past, and sometimes it's decision making. I know some people might see me as a numbers guy, but it's got to be deflating when first series of the game, the ball's in the other team's hands, and the defense is trying to defend a short field. That's got to be a demoralizing way to start off a football game. And look, there's only so many possessions in a football game. That's why these interceptions are really, really killer. You only get about 10, 11, 12 possessions a game. So when you're giving one away, you're giving up an opportunity, and you're giving one to the other team. So, I know some of his fans want to dismiss those interceptions, but I mean, fact is, I think this was a playoff caliber team last year, or at least a better than 500 team last year, and we saw it in the last couple of games. He gave a couple of games away.
I counted 3. I counted at least 3. Again, you really hate to actually. I'm about to say you really hate to do it, but I'm about to do it anyways. You do kind of have to pin it, on certain critical mistakes, like fatal flaw mistakes. Games that end on a pick six, or games that are decided by 7 points or 6 points, and then you're giving away the ball twice, so forth, and the other team scores. So I mean that is a kind of tough deal there. So I mean he did kind of give a few games away, and it's been that way I thought through his career. But again, just by virtue of having a different quarterback, I don't know if it had to be the greatest of all time and Tom Brady. Do you see the BUCS being able to take a whole other step forward now because of Tom Brady, being that he's just not the former starting quarterback?
Well, yeah, I think to me that's what this decision's all about. It's having a better decision maker on the field. I think we've seen some signs of Brady in decline. I mean, you could attribute some of that and to declining. Well, not to a declining, but just a poor receiving core. He didn't have very many options last year, his last season in New England. And that's a fair point. But I think we are seeing some signs of decline there. But the intellect is still there. I think he's got enough of. I mean, he's never really been considered, this quarterback with a big arm, right? But he's got plenty of arm there, and this is kind of the tricky thing with film watching is like, I can watch the same film as you, and we can pick out different examples of we can pick what we want to see.
Yeah.
But overall, what I see is a quarterback who's one of the smartest quarterbacks in the game, and when I say smart, I'm talking about decision making, and still has enough of an arm to make some of those more difficult passes. He's not really a go ball thrower, but he can still hit some of those tight window throws and some of those 10-yard outs that are a big part of this offense. And he's not a mobile quarterback, but he's got a good pocket feel. And you'll see, you won't see him move a lot in the pocket, but you'll see him move just enough.
Yeah.
So there's usually, I think with Brady, when he is under pressure, where there is the pocket is collapsing, he looks really calm there. I mean, there's certainly been games where he's been knocked around, and you see that you've seen that get to him. I mean, the Super Bowls against the Giants, but his calm pocket presence is another plus. But I think this team, especially with the playoffs expanding to 7 teams in each conference. I think this is again, I'm not ready to go yet to talking about a Super Bowl. But I think there's every reason to believe that this team could win 9, maybe 10 games. I think the Vegas over under right now is 9, and that's probably about where it should be. So, I'm optimistic about their chances of breaking this 12-year drought, at least this coming season.
Sweet Moses, I really hope they do. I've been a season ticket holder for far too long to have not seen a playoff game. By the time I actually got my season tickets, man, I just missed out. I think I've had my season tickets since 2006, and I didn't make it to any of the playoff games. And 2007 was the last playoff appearance, and holy crap, I was too busy trying to figure out what the hell I was doing in Central Florida at that time, so I didn't see anything.
I hear you, man. Like, having covered the team now for since I think 2014, it's it can be tough sometimes walking through the facilities and walking into a locker room that that everybody's kind of well, after games, guys are crestfallen, and then the Mondays after games, it's contrary to what a lot of people might think, in thinking that negativity drives coverage. I mean, it's a lot more fun to cover a football team that's winning. I can tell you that.
Right.
I mean, the 2016 season. I mean, I realized they didn't make the playoffs, but
should have made the playoffs.
That was right. That was. I mean, since I've been covering the team, that's been one of the more fun stretches I've had.
Yeah, that was a fun season, man, to be there and watch a lot of those games live. It was just so much fun, and I want to kind of jump back to what we kind of mentioning Tom Brady and some of the things that he could alleviate some of the issues that we've had in the past few years. Obviously, one of the big things that a lot of people are concerned about is the offensive line. we know we need to find a possible starter, or I say possible, definite starter for DeMar Dotson. Again, DeMar Dotson is one of my favorite players in the history of Tampa Bay Buccaneers fandom. Like, hands down. He's undrafted player, came in, won the starting job, kept it. Just a staple in my mind. He and Donald Penn. But he's in decline, like sharp decline. I've kind of been calling for his replacement possibly for the past 3-4 years. Even though he got graded out well according to a few different advanced metrics and so forth, and especially in pass protection. But in the run blocking and all the other stuff, like I just didn't think he was up there. So I always felt like we had to kind of upgrade that position. But just in the offensive line overall, again, the big perception for a lot of people is that Brady won't be able to navigate in the pocket and make things happen. Most good quarterbacks I've seen, most good quarterbacks I pay attention to, they can make stuff happen in the pocket, whether they had a good offensive line or not, where they'd be scrambling like someone like Russell Wilson. Obviously Brady's not a Russell Wilson, but when you can't scramble like Wilson, you can get the ball out of your hands faster. You can hit those checkdowns faster. You can make your decisions a lot quicker and all this stuff. What do you think the impact would be for Brady just on the offensive line in general?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I've heard, I've seen a lot of kind of unease over the state of the Bucs offensive line. I think the main thing in Brady's case is where you want an offensive line to be solid for a player like Brady is along the interior. And I think the Bucs are pretty well set there. I mean, between Ali Marpet and Ryan Jensen and Alex Kappa, I think came along and had a solid enough season. I think as long as that interior stays, continues playing at that high level and can stay healthy, of course, I think this will be a good enough offensive line. I share the concern. I understand, I should say, the concern about the tackles, and not just for this season. It's long term. Donovan Smith is entering his last year of his contract, I believe, and they don't have a right tackle right now. So they definitely need to address that position again, not just for now, but going forward. I think Brady is a savvy enough quarterback, though, that he can withstand and play around maybe some deficiencies on the outside of the offensive line.
Okay.
And he's a guy too that and maybe too much will throw the ball away. He'll find a way to not force it, which was, kind of the opposite of Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, of course, played a lot of hero ball. And the offensive line wasn't always consistent, granted. I mean,
yeah,
but
there were definitely deficiencies there. I mean, I don't want anybody who's paid attention to me or even yourself, I don't think anybody completely ignored that the offensive line wasn't great. But the offensive line was actually, ranked from everything that I could find, as far as pass protection. Just focusing on the pass protection, they were at least average or above, ranked 15th for a lot of areas I've looked at, and I was like, okay, great. I mean, I see it, but I've also seen, it gotten blown up. I've seen terrible games on the offensive line. I mean, it happens, but to everyone, just like every quarterback has a terrible game and they're capable of having a terrible game. But I don't think the offensive line was anywhere near the liability that a lot of people perceived it to be.
Right, I'd agree. I think that's a fair assessment, at least from a pass protection standpoint.
Yeah, run game is a completely different story.
Yeah, definitely a solid interior, but yeah, I wouldn't. I think it's unfair to call it a bad offensive line. I mean, there really aren't many good offensive lines in the NFL right now. Unless you've got a line like I don't know, the Eagles had a couple of years ago, or the Ravens or the Chiefs,
the Cowboys as
you know,
well.
there's throughout the league, I think offensive line play isn't maybe what it used to be, and so um, I think one way around that is to have a more mobile quarterback, which we've seen the Ravens move to, the Chiefs move to, obviously the Seahawks, and so, I mean, I'm looking way out right now, but I wonder whether what after Tom Brady, post TB, what kind of quarterback, because we are at the point, right, where we kind of have to start thinking about that.
No, absolutely, I agree.
What kind of skill set will they be looking for? So and maybe a cue to take is what happens in New England right now. What I wonder. I'm really curious about which direction Belichick's gonna take at quarterback. Whether he goes the more mobile route, we'll see.
Well, man, he's basically had success with damn near every quarterback he's had since Tom Brady emerged. Like everybody who's come in there and played just a short amount of time, they've gone off and they've made names for themselves. They've gotten big contracts after playing in New England. Maybe it's just the stigma and the aura of playing in New England not being good enough for Bill Belichick, who I would argue is one of the greatest head coaches of all time, if not the. Actually, I have to go ahead and say he's the greatest head coach of all time. This man is the streak that he's put together with the rosters he's had. This cat is no other way around it. He's like the most amazing coach pretty much in sports outside of Phil Jackson. Like I hadn't seen anything like that. And he's made a lot of guys who probably didn't deserve it. He's gotten them noticed by being able to be associated with the Patriots and not lose games for the Patriots. Like if it's good enough for Bill Belichick, then somebody else will pay so much more to take him off their hands when they become a free agent. That's happened time and time again. So he'll probably just pick. He can probably take a rookie, possibly. He can probably take a rookie and just go. Like who's ever at the bottom of that first round, who's not taken, that cat may just take off and be the next big thing just because Bill Belichick will put up with him. It's really, really interesting to me because so these guys, it's never enough. They've won six rings. It's never enough. Brady's kind of at the end of his career. So is Belichick. I think we forget kind of how old he is. He's one of the oldest coaches in the NFL. He doesn't have very much time left, right? So you kind of wonder what his thinking was with Brady. And I realize this is a bit of an appeal to authority, but how is it that Belichick is saying, no, we're not going to do anything more than year to year at this point, whereas the BUCS are saying, hey, no, we'll give you 2 years, we'll guarantee the whole thing, come to Tampa. So I wonder whether that I assume that that second year was a real sticking point to Belichick. Like I can't tie up an eighth of my salary cap and a quarterback that I have no idea whether I can rely on in 2022. Yeah,
or 2021 rather.
That's a great point. He's not in win now mode, like quote unquote win now mode, like our GM, which he's been in for a while. But no, that's a great point. I actually didn't think about it. But actually, I apologize. There have been people via Twitter and some other social media sites and forums that kind of brought that up. Like, well, if if he's not good enough for Bill Belichick, if Bill Belichick is now saying, hey, like, we can't accommodate you and your time now because of either the contract, because of the money, or the length of the contract, then it should be a red flag for the BUCS. And it made me raise my eyebrows just a little bit. And then that's kind of why I came up with the question of, well, what is the bigger risk? A 2-year Tom Brady, something new, or 2 years of what you've had before? You know, if it comes down to that, it's like, which one is the bigger? Which one will put you in a bigger hole? And and again, that was something I kind of thought about just a little bit, but I didn't put too much thought, because again, just writing someone off because of age and having one bad year or one down year without taking a look at exactly how and why that bad year came to be, then I kind of dismissed it a little bit.
Yeah, again, yeah, it's an appeal to authority. Not every decision Belichick makes is great. So maybe on this one he'll be wrong. But yeah, I mean, there is that thought bouncing around in the back of my head. Certainly, like, well, why exactly did things kind of fall apart there? I'd really, if only we could get a direct answer from Belichick on this. It'd be fascinating
someday. And so I tell you what. So again, I made mention on the last show when I was joined with original BUCS podcaster, the legend, Mr. Derek Fournier, Mr. Old School, as well as Chris Fisher from BUCS Brief podcast, now retired, that signing Brady was the ultimate win now move. One of the other win now moves that I thought was going to happen, and I disagreed with it before it happened, and I'll speak on it just a little bit, was the re-signing of both Jason Pierre-Paul and Ndamukong Suh, who was just re-signed to a 2-year deal worth up to $10 million. It was just recently revealed today. Initially, it was a 2-year, $8 million deal, but now it's possibility of $10 million. So that bringing those guys both back, I thought was it worried me, not because I dislike Ndamukong Suh whatsoever, or Jason Pierre-Paul, who's awesome, but bringing them both back, it just put a fear in me that the BUCS wouldn't pursue taking one of the top talent on the defensive line, specifically defensive tackle, with Ndamukong Suh. He's a year and a half older than Jason Pierre-Paul, if I'm not mistaken. I figured that he would be the odd man out, but he's back. How do you see that signing with his production last year, his production, as well as the age, which became an issue with the former number 93 last offseason with Bruce Arians? How do you see that re-signing going? How do you feel about that one?
The Suh one or the Pierre-Paul one?
I apologize. Ndamukong Suh. I just focusing on Ndamukong Suh. I kind of figured that Pierre-Paul was coming back, and Ndamukong Suh was a little bit of a shocker to me. Not a complete shock, but it was a little bit. I was kind of meh on it as far as the decision to do it. Not meh about him on a personal level, but just him coming back.
Yeah, when after the season, Arians in his end of season news conference mentioned, keeping this defense together and prioritizing re-signing some of those guys, Shaq Barrett, Pierre-Paul, and Suh. I believed he wanted to do that, but I was also skeptical that they would be able to. But with the signing of Brady, which I'm not sure how those signings, how the incentives in Brady's contract will affect the salary cap. But he's potentially here on a lesser figure than what it would have cost to bring back Winston under the salary, the franchise tag.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they overpaid Brady, at least on an annual basis. Again, worried about that second year, but 25 to 29 for year one, I don't think that's an overpay. I think that's reasonable. So maybe they I think they were in a little bit better cap shape than I think I was expecting. They saved a little bit by restructuring Cam Brate's deal. But it still did surprise me that they found a way to kind of retain all three. And all three being Barrett, Pierre-Paul, and Sue. As far as Sue, you know, I'm not protesting at all the idea of bringing him back. I think good defensive line depth is always a plus. At $8 million, that was it was a bit steep for a player who I don't think is. I think his name carries more weight than maybe his play does right now. I'm not saying he's a bad player by any stretch, but he's older, right? But so at $8 million, that surprised me a lot. I was probably figuring he'd get somewhere between 5 and 7 somewhere. We saw Gerald McCoy sign for about $6 million per year in Dallas. That could have been partly, hey, I want to be in Dallas, and it'll put me closer to Oklahoma. So the location could have been a factor. But yeah, I thought that price tag was a little bit high, and you hope it doesn't kind of take away from something that they can. From money that they could maybe spend elsewhere. Right. I still think they could use a safety. I don't know that free agency is the best place to go out and get your tackle. Maybe the draft is the best way to kind of get that. I think they've got about $20 million in cap room right now. But that I don't think that's last I checked. I don't think that was taking into consideration the $8 million for Sue. So that brings you down to roughly 12 or so. But you've got to set aside $8 to $10 million for your draft class. So they don't have a whole lot of cap space to play with right now. Now you could do some restructurings and move some money around. So I mean they're not going to go over or anything and have to cut guys, but it's the big question there is okay. So you bring back Sue, that gives you depth along the defensive line. That's good. That's plus. But you just hope it doesn't maybe take away from another area of need.
Right. Yeah, because what I'm looking at now is 7.3 mil. What we kind of got for the draft pool cap here. So we got kind of set aside or need to be set aside for all the draft picks that we have. Also, just clarifying, too, with Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy got a 3-year deal, 18 mil, $9 million guaranteed total at the signing. So, guaranteed at signing was $7 million, but total guaranteed was $9 million. So, it's a pretty decent deal here. I think the question you get from him is, that's a 3-year deal, and he's an older cat as well. I think he's just 1 year younger than Sue. So by the time his contract is up, he'll be 34. So
yeah, did you say that was $9 million guaranteed?
Yeah, total guaranteed is $9 million. $7 million guaranteed at the signing, but for his signing bonus and everything, it comes out to be total guaranteed of $9 million.
Yeah, he probably doesn't see the third year of that. Is my guess.
Yeah,
the way that. So maybe he's there. I mean, might even only be there for a season. I mean, depending on his play. But I mean, yeah, that seems like a pretty team friendly structure there.
Yeah, they got an out, next year. So it's a possible 1 year deal for him as well. But right now they did have him signed for 3 at least on paper now. So that's between those two again. The first thing that I was thinking, I was like, well, you go back to that line he kind of gave Bruce Arians. Speaking of, he kind of gave about Gerald McCoy before Gerald McCoy, refused to show up at the training camp. OTAs or whatever. And he was like, at this stage, you start to look at the age and the production and whether the contract matches the production and so forth. I said, okay, all right, well, probably got to have this same conversation with, Ndamukong Suh, right? Or about Ndamukong Suh.
Right, or even Tom Brady.
Or even Tom Brady, right.
So yeah, I mean it's funny how it's funny to hear the spin on something like that.
Yeah, he's a spin doctor. I'm not that high on Bruce Arians. I don't dislike him. I don't hate him. Anything like that. And it's funny because I'm just a clown myself because I love to listen to him to a degree. I like listening to him. It's like listening to an old Baptist preacher. I do not understand how that man is from New York. He sounds like a New Orleans preacher. A preacher from New Orleans. Every time I hear him speak, and I can't stop listening. So I'm always paying attention to what he says, even though I'm like, okay, I don't believe most of what you're saying because you're just gonna walk it back, a couple days later. But that man can sell you anything you want to buy, which is entertaining to me. He sounds like a cross between, a Baptist preacher from New Orleans and a pimp. I don't know which one is more funny. It makes me laugh every time I think about it. Bruce Arians is something else, man. He's a character. He's a guy I would love to sit down and actually talk to. I would love to have a drink with him. But as far as my buying into most of the things he says, I can't. I shouldn't. Most fans shouldn't. He is a master of coach speak like I've not seen ever. And I paid attention to him just a little bit prior to his being hired as the BUCS coach. But since he's been here, I started thinking like, man, I don't know anyone who talks that talk like Bruce Arians.
No, he's entertaining, no doubt about it. And you're right. He's a master spin doctor. And it can be hard to kind of separate sometimes what's direct and honest and what might be spin. I'll give you an example. Like I think Rick Stroud wrote about this. The way he talked about Gerald McCoy last offseason, mm-hmm. and the way he talked about Jameis Winston this offseason, very, very similar. Yeah. Kind of setting the stage for like, hey, we're going to keep our options open. We're gonna look around, and that's in both cases that's ultimately what happened. So I think you've kind of it's tricky, and I don't know that I've totally deciphered it, but yeah, you've got a lot to kind of sometimes sort through there with Bruce Arians and detecting what's honest and what's maybe misleading.
Yeah, he's a fun dude to listen to, like I said. But as a fan who like you want to have somebody you can listen to and be like, okay, I get it. We're gonna rally behind this. For me, I can't do it. I just have to be like, all right, Bruce, all right, Mr. Arians, whatever, man. You and your caps, whatever, man. Just pay attention.
but I mean that's I think that's maybe what you really want in a head coach.
Somebody
right?
with a good poker face, right?
Right, and somebody who can motivate. He can do that. Somebody who can sell. Somebody who can really kind of work a team into believing that it can. And I think that's no doubt that's a strength for Bruce Arians that maybe Cutter didn't have. And how I don't think there's really any way to kind of quantify that. I think Bruce Arians he's a guy you want to play for. I mean, he's a guy when he talks, he's got your attention.
See, now the thing, what's funny about that, man? I can go back to Greg Schiano. At the time when Greg Schiano was around in Tampa, a lot of people hated him. Obviously, I mean, people just hated him. You know who loved him? Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy was the hardest working player on the team. He was the face of the team in my mind. He was the face of the franchise, and Levante David was right there behind him. But Gerald McCoy has said on several occasions that he learned more about football and life with Greg Schiano than he had in any other time before. Up until the point where he made the comparison between the Ohio State defensive line and and being the best defensive line he coached or what have you when he was a few years ago. But Greg Schiano, again, he got that. He kind of rallied, his best players, like the best players wanted to play for him. Dirk Cutter, I moved on to Dirk Cutter. Dirk Cutter was another one of those guys who, for me, I love listening to him speak. I paid attention to him. He was brutally honest. I think he was too honest to a degree. Because a lot of people hated to hear him say stuff like that line you hear a lot of fans talk about, or you see him quote about, if I knew how to fix it, I would. If I'm not mistaken, Bruce Arians said something just like that again last year. They did not get received the exact same way as they did with Cutter. Same line, same concept of, hey, if I knew how to fix it, we'd be fixing it. It'd be done. It wouldn't be a problem if I knew the answer. It's kind of one of those things. Who did not have that kind of demeanor, who did not have that kind of bravado? That damn Lovie Smith. Lovie Smith, man, I swear to Moses. Lovie Smith, you be listening to Lovie Smith, you be like, hey, man, what are you talking about? Like, you don't believe what you're saying. I know you don't. And Lovie Smith kept saying, his expertise was defense and he was going to do this and that, and you can get more with less. Like, when he traded Darrelle Revis and all that stuff, when you heard him speak, it was not the same thing. In those 2 years that he was in Tampa, you didn't get the same feeling as any other those other coaches mentioned, Cutter, Schiano, or Arians. Lovie Smith was like, hey, I'm going to say what I'm going to say and you're going to believe it, or, we out of here. That's it. He was something else, man. I got the chance to work with him.
Oh, you did?
I did. I got a chance to work with him on one of the BUCS promos for the 2014 season, his first year. On that shoot, I think I had him, Vincent Jackson. It was him, Vincent Jackson, Levante David, and who was my Alteran Werner. Alteran Werner, we did this big promo, and I had to feed him the lines. I basically fed him the script as he sat there, and we kind of shot him doing the video. But it was like a all hands on deck season ticket commercial for the BUCS. And when I met him and I started talking to him and kind of started giving him the lines, he was so laid back about everything, and he just didn't care. He was just kind of, he was like he had all day. He was just sitting there all day and just chilling. I'm just like, all right, I think we're done with you, love. You can go back to coaching, whatever you're doing, man. You can go, but he was just so nonchalant. So everything that he said was also nonchalant, and I think that's why a lot of people didn't get that kind of feel, or at least the fans that I've spoken to didn't get the same feeling as you get from a Cutter who might have been too brutally honest, as well as Schiano, who was too cold and you felt it. And then now it's an Arians who feels like that cooler, older uncle, or somebody you wish it was your uncle, and just, at least those three guys kind of drive emotion, whereas Lovie Smith didn't. And that's kind of a weird dynamic to me.
Yeah, I think sometimes, it just comes down to, like, two guys could say the same exact thing, and, like, people just like one guy more than the other, so they don't question it as much. Like, we could compare resumes, right, and say, well, maybe it has something to do with Bruce Arians, and he's more accomplished than Dirk Cutter or something like that. I'm not saying Dirk Cutter's a bad coach or anything. I don't think that he is. Was this maybe was Tampa a bad situation for him? Probably. But I think sometimes it just comes down to, well, I like that guy, so I'm not gonna question what he says.
Right. Yeah. Well, he was. I thought he was a cool cat, but he's out the door now. And obviously, Mr. Arians has come in and didn't do as well as Cutter did in his first season. Yet, obviously, those two Coach of the Year awards from a few seasons ago, they still carry much more weight than anything that Dirk Cutter has done so far in his career. So it's kind of a thing. We're gonna roll with Bruce, I guess, for a couple more years and see what happens. At least 2 years while we have the new king in town, Mr. Tom Brady. See how that goes. So I wanted to touch on this before we get out of here, man. This might take a good bit of time, and I want myself and other fans to kind of get as much knowledge as we can about what it is that you do. You're known as, again, one of those quote-unquote numbers guys. You probably take a lot of heat as well for your work in analytics, as well as some of your opinions you have applying analytics to games itself, especially in real time. Is it even possible to put into words how you formulate like the either an argument or I guess I have to call it like a narrative? Like, how do you come up with like some of the stories and a lot of the stuff that you write, which are great, by the way? Everything that I've read from you from the Tampa Bay Times, or which is now you have the BUCS Red Zone newsletter, which is free to anybody who's listening. Go ahead and check that out. A lot of good stuff, especially with the new signing of Brady. It's been out for a week. Oh, no, I apologize. Not been out for a week. There's one issue that came out today, Thursday the 26th. But you do a lot of work, again, with numbers, and you delve into those numbers. How do you come up with some of the formulas you end up using, and can you explain how much research goes into some of the points that you put out in your pieces?
Well, first off, thanks for all that. Thank you for the compliments. That means a lot. And I'll try to kind of stumble through this answer here. And this might be more of a mission statement. Like my goal really is to tell the truth as best I can. And so I think in sports, like in politics, there's a lot of misinformation or just bad information out there. There's a lot of competition for your attention. So I strive to be, I hope, the signal amid the noise, because I think the more informed we all are, the better decisions we can make. So I try to, I'm trying to tell the truth as best I can, and I hope it's of service to people. So in order to do that, I try to use every tool available to me. And this is maybe my own doing. My Twitter handle's @metrics. I do have a data-driven focus, but I really think of it more as evidence driven. Whether it's not just one thing. It's not just numbers, but it's not just watching film. It's not just experience. It's all three of those, kind of inform the way I write, because all of them need context. Data without context isn't helpful. A film without context isn't helpful. And so I really try to blend all three of those things to inform my my stories: experience, data, and film. And so, and my process really is like, I don't ever really turn off, I think this is just, it's kind of in your blood a little bit to kind of, any chance you have to watch more film or do more research. I find myself even in at times where I'm not kind of officially on schedule doing those kinds of things, just because it's interesting, and I think people will find it interesting. So that's a little bit of my process. If you have follow-ups about more, I'm happy to get into the nitty gritty with you on it. But it's bottom line. I want to get to the truth.
Okay. Now, in doing that, again, I want to touch on something you mentioned, again, context. And I'm huge on getting context about everything that I read, or as much as possible. Anything that I come across with, I start trying to look for the context, because it's easy for someone to put up, volume stats, volume people, to put up, generic statements or take everything and not have it in context. And in my experience so far, just in life, I know this. When you put stuff in context, it's the bearer of bad news. People don't want to, a lot of people they're just good being willfully ignorant. They're good hearing what they want to hear or seeing what they want to see and not having any other information or any other perspective because it's what they want to see. And when you introduce a lot of the other context for some of these numbers or statements, it looks like you're just completely arguing against whatever positives are in that statement or that, batch of numbers. And obviously, we joked about it earlier, you get labeled as, seen as, perceived as, talked about as a quote-unquote hater. You hate anything and everything that everybody else likes. How do you – I think you and I are kind of kindred spirits to a degree in that world of being a hater and so forth, just because, again, you start looking for context and you start putting a different perspective and sometimes adding in your own opinion to some of these things that you find. Would you consider yourself a contrarian? When you start seeing some of the things that you see or hearing some of the things that you hear, do you start, even if you want to believe them for yourself, the things that you are writing and narratives and pieces that you put together for yourself, do you ever catch yourself? I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This seems a little bit too good to be true. Let me pause. Let me go and check this out a little bit further, or see if I'm correct, or see if what someone else says is correct.
That certainly happens sometimes. The way I kind of look at it is like, I ask questions. I'm a journalist. That's what I do. I ask questions, and maybe by nature I'm a bit of a skeptic, But yeah, it's there are moments certainly where I hear something, I'm like, I wonder whether that's true, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I think a couple of years ago, I recirculate this story every so often. When the BUCS drafted Aguayo. So when I first heard that, I was like, what? They did what? And then I got to thinking about it, and it was like, well, maybe there's something here that I'm not seeing. Maybe they're privy to something that I'm not. Maybe there's some real rationale behind this. So when I kind of wrote that story about whether it was worth drafting a kicker in the second round, whether kickers make enough of a difference to do that. The way I kind of approached it was like, well, let's look at every possible variable that we can think of that would make it worthwhile and test it. And each one that I came back to, the answer kept coming back no. Whether it was field goal distance, field goals made, percentage of field goals, the answer just kept coming back no.
Yeah, the answer was no.
And as it turned out, it was no. Don't use early draft picks on kickers. And then it wasn't second round, but they did it again last draft by using a fifth rounder on a kicker. And it's nothing against the kickers. It's just how are you going to use your draft capital? But I mean it's not. I start with a question, and then I check it out, and you always have to be really careful. And this is something that I constantly work to resist, is especially when you've got deadlines, right? Mm-hmm. is not bending the data, not forcing the data to fit a hypothesis, and if it's, if you've got a theory and the data turns out to back it up, great. If you've got a theory and it says otherwise, uh, you've got either you don't have a story, or maybe that's interesting in itself, but I think it's just not fair to the people you cover. I mean, these guys, the front office, the coaches, the players, their jobs are on the line. So, I think you just, the stakes are too high to come up with a narrative and bend the data to fit that narrative.
Yeah, and that's a big difference between a lot of what's become the most popular, I believe, coverage and in a lot of news as well. I mean, not just specific to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but in sports and in media now, because a lot of it is amateur driven, fan sports blogs, TMZ, people who are not journalists, anybody who has a camera and a microphone, which could literally just be your phone, and these kind of things, they've kind of bent the reality and they've kind of bent the perception of media. So I'm pretty sure you have a lot of experience and a lot of, probably negative stories where fans, they confuse you because you cover the Bucs. They tend to think that you're a fan of the Bucs. Therefore, your stories, your data, and all of your point of views should be from a fan's perspective. And that's kind of muddied the waters for a lot of journalists like yourself. What have you seen from that? Like, how bad is it for you as a journalist whose job is to, put your pieces out, put your stories out, your articles and everything? How bad is it for you that fan coverage and in the written form, like that's kind of influenced how you guys either are perceived or if it's actually done anything to harm the industry that you're working in?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a consideration, right? Um, I think something that I've struggled to understand, and you bringing this up maybe is part of an explanation, is sometimes the comments, well, hey, you need to be a better fan, and it's like, well, I'm sometimes surprised that people that are commenting don't realize, hey, it's not my job to be a fan. It's my job to be objective and fair, and tell the truth. Um, so that type of comment, that type of specific comment, does confuse me. So I think sometimes there's a media literacy issue. But as a whole, in general, fan generated content, I mean, I don't have an issue with that at all. I think it builds community, builds connection. Hey, go for it. Let's do it. Let's all talk Bucs football, or NFL. I think there's enough success to go around, and the cream rises. So have at it. If you want to be a sports journalist, do it. So there's two things that are really important to me. Is the content good, right? Is it interesting? Is it original? Is it memorable? Is it distinctive in some way? And then two, is it trustworthy, right? Is the source accurate? Is he accountable? Not just to his audience, but the people he covers, right? And I think that's a big thing, for a lot of the journalists that that cover the BUCS is, we have to face these people, and if we criticize, we have to face them. If we get something wrong, we have to criticize them.
Right.
So, we can't just throw kind of vague statements online, and if it ends up working out, claiming credit for it, and if not, just kind of ignoring it. No, I mean we're people. People come to us because they trust us, and the people we cover, we're accountable to them too. So
Right.
that accountability is a big thing, and is sometimes lacking in some of the fan generated content.
Yeah, that's it. Because I mean, just at the click of a button, because everybody has their phones with them or what have you on Twitter or whatever it can be. You just can get all kinds of bad info, and people will run with it. And a lot of these cats I'm seeing, unfortunately, because Twitter's algorithm is just ridiculous, and I get to see what other people like and what they retweet and all these other things. But you're right. A lot of guys want credit without having to have credibility. They don't have to answer to anyone, and they can just make up whatever they like. And because they have a large number of people who will follow them, they can get that message out, that misinformation out so quickly, and people will just eat it up and go with it. And it's it sucks. It really does. And I think again, but you also have people who are in the building. You have people who actually do who actually do decent work sometimes, but then they get muddied because they try to appease a certain group of fans in order to get their sales or advertisements or whatever it may be. They try to kind of get that stuff, and then they kind of appease to the fan side, and they go to being a fan more so than they get to be a journalist, and they don't get held accountable for stuff like that as well. But it's a muddied area, and I do feel bad about people who like yourself who actually do good work as writing, even though some of the stuff sometimes I don't get myself, and sometimes it's not my opinion, and sometimes I may agree with it or not. But people like yourself, Greg Allman, Rick Stroud, a lot of you guys who actually do good work, you kind of face a whole lot of mean-spirited people who just don't know any better. I think that may be the case with a lot of other things, but particular in journalism.
Well, yeah, I think there's a few things going on. I think you have some powerful people who are intent on undermining journalists and media. I don't want to get too political there, but I mean you can figure out what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think we have an assault on independent media. So I think there's a I think that's a factor. I also think and this kind of goes back to my process, is so social media, right? I think some of this commentary, right, that you're talking about, I've always perceived it as a vocal group, but a minority, and the comments I get on social media are different than the comments I get through email or letters, like handwritten letters that people will send to me at the Times, or in DMs even. I think it's the people that appreciate the work that aren't necessarily vocal about it. It's the people who feel challenged in some way that tend to, or disagree, that tend to be more vociferous in their reactions. So social media too is the thing that you have to be on guard for is confirmation bias, right? I mean, it is just rampant on Twitter and Facebook, and it's it's something that you just I think you have to guard against. Am I agreeing with this just because I want to agree with it? Am I seeking out information that confirms my priors? I think just because somebody likes my tweet or retweets my tweet doesn't mean it's a good opinion. It may still be a bad opinion,
Right.
but it's just somebody also shares the same bad opinion. So that's something to definitely. Or hey, I have a bigger Twitter following than you, so therefore my opinion is more credible. No, that's not how this works. Just guarding against that's a challenge. Guarding against confirmation bias.
Yeah. And you take that into account, kind of jumping back just a little bit, you kind of take that into account when you're doing your own writing yourself. You start wondering whether or not you put, like, the stuff that you're putting together, whether or not it's, like, is this what I thought, or is this what I'm finding out? Like, do you ever get to that point, like, in your writing again? Like, you ever get like, okay, wait a minute, this is exactly what I thought, and then you double check. You be like, okay, wait a minute, this is this feels, again, almost too good to be true. Like, have you ever had to walk back on something that you were reading, or I'm sorry, not reading, but something that you were putting together, a story, and you're like, okay, this is too much. Let me step away from this because this may not be going the way that I think it should be going, or your opinion could completely change while you're actually coming up with a story.
That's certainly happened. I'm not coming up with an example off the top of my head, but like there's numerous ideas I've had that have just been kind of that have just kind of fallen apart. And I think that's part of the process. Is you have an idea, let me look into it. Oh, this is a story. You start writing the story and you're like, oh my God, I don't have a story. And sometimes it stops there, right?
Okay.
And then sometimes you do more research and then you're like, oh, I have a story again. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. So there have definitely been moments where that's happened. Fortunately, at the times, I've had the luxury of having good colleagues and good editors. That we read each other's work. So if something does seem off, we have a process in place that a lot of times we'll catch it, not 100% of the time, but a lot of times.
Yeah.
And not everybody has. I mean, we're not a robust operation, these days, but that's still a part of the process that we value. Good, not just good writing, but good editing.
Yeah, checks and balances. That's
right.
That's kind of, I guess, the thing that you have to have. And accountability. Accountability is something that's big, and a lot of people don't have to answer to. Before I let you get out of here, man, I want to thank you once again for joining me. I also want to reiterate and give you a couple minutes here to talk about the BUCS Red Zone newsletter, which is relatively new to the Tampa Bay Times, and it's free. A lot of people need to know about it if you don't know about it. Tell me what you got in this issue and what you got coming up.
Yeah, so as you said, we just launched the BUCS Red Zone newsletter. If you go to tampabay.com and look at the top of the screen, you'll see a newsletters tab. You click on that, and that'll take you through the sign up process. As you said, it's totally free, and we're looking to, this is something that we've been kind of kicking around for a while, and I was originally thinking that maybe we would get this off the ground closer to the start of the season. And then the BUCS signed Tom Brady, and it was like, oh no, we need to do this right now.
Damn Tom.
Again, second greatest TB, Tom B in Tampa Bay. But no, I kid. So we launched our first edition Tuesday, and we're going to aim to have that deliver that to you weekly. So we'll have in the next issue, in the first issue we I wrote quite a bit about Tom Brady and some potential red flags here about and just kind of what to expect for this coming season from him. And then also, winners and losers of the deal, and then also, Rick Stroud had a really good story recently about that took you inside the deal. So we touched on that a little bit. But this is going to be a story all season long. So there'll be lots of Tom Brady coverage in there, and I expect in the next issue, which we'll deliver again Tuesday morning, will be some more Tom Brady. So if you're looking for a diversion from all the disheartening news surrounding the COVID-19, we're here for you, breaking down Tom Brady, the BUCS, the NFL draft. So really, really excited about this, and again, it's free. All you have to do is sign up. We'll take care of the rest.
You say free?
Free.
People love free. People love free. Well, man, I want to thank you for giving me some of your free time tonight. I know you got a family and everything to get back to. Again, thank you for your time. Before you get out here, one more thing. Again, I mentioned before you're also a contributor to the Football Outsiders annual football almanac, which comes out right before the season comes up. For anybody who's not checked that out, what can they look forward to when that does come out, or what can they look to in some of the previous football almanacs?
Oh yeah, this is really the guide to the football season. I'll write this year. I'll be writing the BUCS chapter and also the Saints chapter. But yeah, we dive into all 32 teams, really really deep stuff, and some of the most accurate projections around. So we'll preview the teams. We'll preview individual players. It's a great source to get you ready for the season. If you want to be a more informed fan, be able to kind of call things before they happen. But also, if you're a fantasy football fan, it's a tremendous resource. So and that comes out usually mid-July sometime. And you can find it at footballoutsiders.com.
Cool, and they can also find you on Twitter if they've not already been following you at Tom Metrics on Twitter. That's at TOMETRICS on Twitter. Again, man, I want to thank you for your time. Listeners, if you're still hanging there with me, thank you for listening. You've been listening to Robert Green and Mr. Thomas Bassinger. Mr. Numbers, Mr. Stat Guy. Thank you one more time, Robert Green, Outside Leverage. You're welcome.